Here on the edge of Lough Neagh, the blue-green algae is coming in waves, building up to a toxic, gloopy blanket. And I'll tell you what, it stinks.
The loch is dying, smothered in toxic scum that's dangerous for humans and deadly for wildlife. But how has this happened?
This is effluent. Lough Neagh's been used as a toilet.
This year, it's the scale of the algae that's unprecedented, not just covering much of the loch, itself the size of the Isle of Wight, but also flowing out to contaminate beaches. Too much of what's excreted by farm animals, and to a lesser extent us humans, seeps into rivers and flows into the loch.
You can visualise it through a slurry tank being emptied into a river that goes into Lough Neagh. That feeds the algae. The algae in turn grow in very prolific numbers. They suck the oxygen out of the water and they start feeding themselves to the point that it becomes frenetic. It becomes a toxic soup.
In the last decade, there's been a huge deliberate expansion in livestock farming, with more cattle, pig numbers growing from 480,000 in 2013 to 738,000 in 2022, and over 1 million more chickens in the same period. The urine and dung from all those animals is worsening pollution. Campaigners say farmers have too much political influence, with damaging results.
There is virtual immunity to major polluters in Northern Ireland. That's why a number of years ago the United Kingdom Environmental Law Association described Northern Ireland as a dirty corner of the UK. And when you don't have a government, and when many people believe it was the government that created the context for this pollution in the first place, people are thinking about what to do in the future.
We both felt that very little, if anything, was being done to address and to control the situation.
The pollution has got so bad this year, people have had enough. And this protest meeting is packed.
We're hurt, we're upset, that this is happening.
Such a horrid state that the rivers and waterways have become. My husband fishes locally and he can't continue.
It seems a real disaster, but what's causing it's another problem. They're blaming farmers, but I don't think it's the farmers.
What's happening now is very special and very interesting. I haven't seen it in a lifetime of campaigning in Northern Ireland. What we're seeing now is a thriving ecosystem of local communities coming together.
Scientific research suggests that while some of the pollution originates from human sewage treatment, nearly 2/3 of the phosphate, the main cause of the blue-green algae, is coming from farms. And not far off, half the province's farmland drains into Lough Neagh.
When cows or other livestock are out in the field, their dung and urine drops on the grass. Now that can cause pollution problems itself, but often they're housed for at least 6 months a year in sheds, and then their waste is dropped indoors and must be collected, and it often ends up somewhere like this, a giant slurry tank. And then it gets piped into these. These are what farmers call digesters. They are in effect big stomachs, and the slurry spends about 56 days in there, and it separates it out between methane, a gas that they want for fuel, and digestate, something that can be spread on the fields as a fertiliser. This is where they store the gas. It does actually say biogas on the side of it, and it's become quite a significant fuel for farmers, and they also want to actually put it into the grid. But what we're interested in is what happens to that digestate, the stuff that ends up on the fields and is still part of the pollution problem. And this is a pile of it here. It's been slightly dried, this stuff, and slightly compressed, but this nevertheless is digestate.
But at this government-backed research farm, they're developing ways to separate the harmful phosphate from the more useful fertiliser.
So what we're doing here is we have a very slow turning screw in the middle, covered with a screen around it which is porous. We pump, in this case, digestate into the front end of the separator. It's pushed down the screw, and eventually as we start to get a solid build up at the bottom end of the screw, we get a back pressure, and that back pressure then pushes more of the solid material to this end and pushes the liquid out through the screens. And then this goes to a storage tank, and that's what's spread on the fields with a reduced phosphorus content in it.
And the phosphate-rich solid byproduct could have a use too.
In the front, we have a bucket of the separated liquid. It's been through the mechanical separation process where we're looking at. That then is reapplied to fields with a much lower phosphorus content. Gotcha. We have the separated solid material, which has been dried, and then we have pelleted that material. Compared that in combustion trials to commercial wood pellets, and it has 90% of the energy value, which is really encouraging.
So if farms across Northern Ireland, livestock farms, were to adopt this kind of technology with this kind of separation, what impact could it have?
We could see a huge reduction in the phosphorus loss to water and a big impact on water quality, a very positive impact.
So it could really help to clean up Lough Neagh and other water bodies?
Correct.
The group representing farmers, the Ulster Farmers Union, declined to talk to us, but farmers also blame the algae on sewage leaks and extreme weather. Climate change is worsening the toxic blooms. Average Lough Neagh temperature has increased by 1 degree since 1995, and this year's weather, hot June and wet July, favoured algal growth. But campaigners and scientists agree that this is essentially a man-made problem, and a big one.
Lough Neagh is the heartland of Northern Ireland. If this was in England, this would be such a massive story that you couldn't get to the House of Commons. There'd be so many outraged people outside.